Welcome to your Family Health Revolution conversation series with Carla, Atherton, and friends, where our HFF family comes together not to tell you what you should do, but what you can do. Take charge of your health. You can do this. In fact, you're the only person who can. This is Carla Atherton, Director of the Healthy Family Formula and host and producer of the Children's Health Summit, here with a new series called Your Family Health Revolution, Conversations with Friends. And so I am here with my good friend Tiffany Lynch, and we're talking about a diagnosis is only an opinion. Never take you can't for an answer. And you will soon find out why. Tiffany has been chosen for this topic, or actually, I built the topic around my experience with Tiffany as first client, then a trainee, and also, of course, throughout that whole period as a really awesome friend, confidant, colleague, all of that. So I'm going to actually introduce Tiffany really quickly by reading her bio. And then after that, we're going to get started on the conversation. All right, so Tiffany Lynch is a professionally trained functional health coach certified through the Healthy Family Formula. She has been passionate about health and fitness for over 2 decades while working within the health sciences sector her entire career. The insights she's gleaned from those years and the experience of coming up against a chronic illness has inspired her to take a deeper look at how we achieve true health and restore resilience. Empowering others to do the same has become her life's purpose. Unfortunately, the medical system is overburdened and there are huge gaps in the care and treatment of chronic illness. Navigating these gaps, reducing toxic burden, and unraveling the root cause of illness has afforded Tiffany's family a way out of the medical model, which promised nothing but lifelong medications. In those early moments when she experienced far more fear than hope, Tiffany felt the deep longing for a guide, someone who understood, someone who had lived it and could help them through. Her practice, Restoring Resilience, was born out of that deep need. Nothing brings her more joy than watching families achieve a deeper level of physical, mental, and emotional health than they ever knew was possible. Awesome. Welcome, welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you, Carla.
All right.
That was quite an introduction. I appreciate it.
I love it. It's like it's an inspiration in and of itself, like just the story, and this is only the tip of the iceberg of your story. So let's jump in. Okay, so how about we jump into this conversation discussing, actually, tell everybody listening how we met and where you were at that time, because I think that was, for me, I don't know, that was when I met you, but it seems to be where you were really in the thick of this whole diagnosis, newer diagnosis. You'd actually gone quite a bit, like a few months, like down the road before we met. Look like of your journey, and then let's start there. What was going on there at that time?
I think we were maybe 8 or 9 months into our journey.
Okay.
Um, the first, couple of months, I guess, took a lot of bravery for sure, and a lot of research. So I know you always talk about how much we had done before we even found you. I really spent most nights tirelessly researching, trying to figure out answers for what is really causing these health issues and how do we fix it. So we met around the 8 or 9 month point. I think I had
It was
found you
May.
on, was it?
Yep. I remember the
Well,
month, and it was
yeah.
that was like 5 years ago or something, wasn't it?
Um, yes. Yeah. 5 years ago.
Yep.
And I think I had found you, either on a summit or through Epidemic Answers, but it was in my research on how do we get Layla better that I had found you.
Yep.
Um,
And so what were you guys facing? So just like let people know, what is it
yeah.
that she was diagnosed with? What were you told?
So
What was the
at
trajectory?
At 18 months, Layla's ankle started to look really swollen.
Yeah.
And at the time, she was still in her crib, and we thought maybe she had twisted an ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And we did all of the things that they have you do, and primary care and x-rays, and then orthopedics, and they had her in a boot, and they thought it was a fracture.
Mm-hmm.
But while we were going through that process, she had a toe also get very swollen. And once the toe got swollen, we thought, could she have broken it? Because she's running around in this boot. I want to say a month or two later, she got sick and her knee blew up like a soccer ball. It was absolutely enormous. I'll never forget that night and that morning. She laid in my bed, whimpering through the night. She had a high fever, but she whimpered all night long. And when I picked her up in the morning and brought her downstairs, she just put her hands up and said, "Mommy can't stand, can't walk." I thought, what? And she pointed to her knee, and I picked her pants up, and her knee was this big. And I knew then that something was wrong.
Yeah.
And I called the doctor back, and I said, I was concerned about this all along, but I think we have a problem. So we went in and we did some labs, and I mean, it's interesting, right? Like how many things go wrong in the process, but there were so many things that went wrong names on lab work that didn't get completed. There was a lot of that.
Yeah.
But fast forward a couple of months, and we finally get a juvenile idiopathic arthritis diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Took a bunch of doctors and lots of lab work and all of that. And I think for me, at least, someone who tends to be very much of a doer,
Mm-hmm.
that was a really hard diagnosis because there weren't really a lot of answers. I kept calling it like the diagnosis of no answers. What caused it? What's contributing to it? How do we make it better? When does it get better? How do they get to remission? Nobody knows. We're just going to wing it. And it was amazing to me that I would sit in these offices, and we got 3 opinions. We went to Hospital for Special Surgery in New York, which is ranked 3 for pediatric rheumatology. And it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the opinions were the same. They wanted her to start on NSAIDs, and then they wanted her to move to methotrexate or Enbrel. And basically they're trying to turn off their immune system.
Yeah.
So that was Layla's diagnosis for sure. And that was confirmed from doctor to doctor. And there were some slight differences that were happening in some of their protocols or, treatment algorithms, but nothing drastic. My background prior to this was in pharmaceutical sales. I had been in pharmaceutical sales since 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that background probably served me in a lot of ways. And I'm not sure, how many people have family or friends or kind of an inside peek into what goes on in the medical system. But having been in pharmaceutical sales for, I don't know, I think it was like 15 years at the time, I had called on hundreds of doctors throughout those years in different specialties, but would maybe only recommend 2 or 3. And that's not good odds. And I think it's the reason why we see medical error being the 3rd leading cause of death. It is no surprise to me, having had an inside peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, what many of us don't know as moms, as we trust and put our faith in these doctors, is that they only know what they've been taught.
Yes.
And what they've been taught is just a very limited amount of information. It's what is the diagnosis? What is the medicine? And that's what your doctor is able to tell you. Mm-hmm. And many of them don't research, read, or continue education at all because medical insurance is a fortune and their practices are busy and they're just trying to keep their head afloat, and reading and researching does not bring money into the practice. So we have, unfortunately, an enormous amount of doctors who are apathetic, checked out, overworked, underpaid for some of the work that they do, but don't realize that there are things that they're missing in their practice. Mm-hmm. And I knew that going in. So when I was delivered that diagnosis and I had all of these questions and no one was able to answer them, I guess, my first reaction was, I don't know, is not okay. And I've always been a why person. I'm that annoying friend.
Me too.
Why?
4-year-old. Why?
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 Yes. I've had friends say that to me. You're the 2-year-old. Why is everything a why? Because I need to know why. So
Me too.
that's how I felt right from the jump. I have to know why. Why does my baby have a multi-system inflammatory issue happening? There's got to be a reason. Idiopathic was unacceptable to me. And I'm not going to lie. I panicked too. When they said, well, joint injections might be the least invasive. I said, okay, let's sign it up for next week. And then I went home and thought, what are you, insane? Let's take a pause and figure some things out. So
That's right.
that's the beginning of the story.
I have to say, and I have to say too, Tiffany, our experience was quite similar in not like, I mean, I didn't come from pharmaceutical sales, but I always had why critical thinker, right? Like that's what I literally was like my goal when I was raising my children was to have them think and think for themselves. Right. And so nothing that I was told was adding up. And it was just like incongruent with everything else I knew about like the human body, about life itself. Like, so when my daughter first got her diagnosis, it was like, and again, I don't want to own that. Like when I say that, that's when it's like, we assume that we own these and we don't own that anymore. But at the time it was like receiving, like you said, delivered this diagnosis to us. And so that's like a boom, right at the beginning, like, right. It's like this nail in the coffin, like you've got this and that's it. And there were no questions. We weren't encouraged to ask questions. In fact, we were discouraged from asking questions. I was told to get off of Dr. Google, and I was told that, the gluten and dairy is no big deal. And we were laughed out of offices. We were told that, no, you can't have that test. That's literally like $35. And, no, I'm not going to check for C-peptide or whatever because it's going to be destructive. Her pancreas is going to be destroyed anyway. And so there was no answers. And what you said in the bio, like what I said about you, like read about you in the bio, was like, giving these, there were no answers in this medical model because it was just like, that's it. We have one pill and that pill is literally to suppress symptoms. It's not to actually heal, uncover, discover, find out why. So I was the same as you. I showed up at that hospital with a pot of soup because they were feeding the kids who were newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes Fruit Loops. And I was like, are you for real? And then they were asking these kids in our education, like, and I totally try not to sound super negative, but this is not okay. It's just not okay. And so we have to look at that and and have the strength to say, this is not okay. What can we do that's better? Yeah. Because these are our children we're talking about. So they were literally asking in these education this education, I guess, meeting we had with the dietitian, and our whole family had to attend before she was released from the hospital. And they were asking her what she wants to eat. And then they were telling us how much insulin to give her according to how many carbs she chose to eat in the day. Like, and this kid's 11 years old. And I'm going, what? And then I said, okay, well, I asked the doctor, how much sugar, so the glycemic index and if you know glycemic index, you know that means that how fast it takes for food to turn into sugar and in the bloodstream, okay? So I said, how much does that have to do with spikes in her blood sugar? And he said, nothing. And this is the endocrinologist that takes care of all of the children within a 300-mile radius of where we were living. So I was like, I'm sorry, I got to find more answers. So I feel like that is a very similar story to yours and a lot of people listening, in that this is the catalyst, is like, there weren't the answers we expected to have of this system. And so we had to go outside of it to find out what would truly help our children to move through whatever experiences they were having, right? So what was so go ahead, you were going to say something.
I also think, though, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, is similarly to, there were questions that we didn't get answered, right? Yeah. I think many of us that go down this journey of how do we find the answers also felt like, as this child's mother, yes, no one is going to be more invested than I am. Mm-hmm. And that knowing, I think, is a beautiful gift for everyone. Like no one, doctors may have gone to more school than you, but that doesn't mean they know more in every area. And
Yeah.
they will never care or love as much as you do, and they will never be as invested as you are.
Yep.
And I think that that's a wonderful knowing.
It is, and that actually is giving the power back to the parents, right? Because we can be told over and over again that we don't know, and that we have this hierarchical relationship where we are like kind of down here, and we're just like the dumb mom, and we've got to kind of do what we're told, and that's not how it works. I mean, with our coaching, like with what we do with people that come to us, like we're doing what we want to do, what we wished we would have had or did have. I mean, hopefully you did have some of that. Work with me. I don't know, but it's like what we need, right, as parents to move through these things. Of course we need supports, and that's just the nature of life. Yeah, and we all have this like a part to play, and then we have this capacity to do that. And I think that's the first step, is that to return to that mother wisdom, that mother instinct, that, or father, if fathers are watching too, grandparents, whatever, caregiver, we have that instinct, and that will inform us so much more if we listen to it, and have it respected by the people that we work with, that we choose to hire, right, and on our behalf. So okay, so you get to this point, okay, so where you're like, okay, I got this diagnosis, I'm scared, I'm worried, I'm kind of willing to do some of these things, but you're catching yourself. So
Yeah.
where did you go from there? Because you're like literally in the medical system, you get this diagnosis. Like, what did you do? You started researching. Where did you go from there?
Um, so at the time, I had been working with a chiropractor that did muscle testing and kinesiology.
Right. Okay.
Um, so we were using the chiropractor and trying to, see if we could maybe figure out like foods or supplements. Layla had pretty much been gluten-free and dairy-free her whole life.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, though, right before the knee blew up was one of the only exposures she had ever had to gluten. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, we were kind of on that path already, but I think an illness and the gluten kind of just tipped her over the edge.
Yeah.
So we had been working with a chiropractor and trying to figure some things out. And I don't know how, but I had found this book called The Other Side of Impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And what an amazing book, right? Because it talks about all of these families and their experiences with these impossible diagnoses, right? Like you're not going to cure it, they're incurable. And it talks about MS and it talks about juvenile arthritis. And in the book, you hear these children get better. And that was sort of all I needed. I think I've always sort of had the mentality of, if they can do it, why can't I?
Right.
And all I needed to do was read that someone got their child better this way, and I knew that we were going to do it. I didn't know how yet, but I was absolutely determined. Um, so I started going through, PubMed is a sort of online resource for research articles.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started reading everything I could online, trying to find, I think it was actually in the back of that book, The Other Side of Impossible, that had epidemic answers as a resource. So I looked through all the resources in the book and I dug through everything that I could find. And my background had sort of always been in science. Like I've always loved science. I always thought I was kind of like a bit of a science geek in school. I doubled up in it to drop language. Like I loved science.
Mm-hmm.
So pharmaceutical sales kind of fit into that a bit too. And prior to that, I would say we were healthy. Like we were healthy, we worked out, but I don't think we really fully understood all of the things that go into true health, right? Like, oh, well, I eat healthy, I work out, I'm healthy. But,
Right.
I didn't know about metals and mold and parasites and, all of the things that our bodies could be riddled with without us having any idea.
Mm-hmm.
So because my background was kind of in science and I was accustomed to being able to read clinical trials and things like that, I was able to do a good amount of research.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this other stuff was new to me, but it resonated. Like it felt like, don't stop, something is here.
Yeah.
And there were things that seemed completely woo-woo to me. at that time, like with the science background. And I've jumped right in. I'm like bathing in the woo-woo now, but it took me a while.
We're going to talk about
It
that in a
took me a
sec.
while.
Uh-huh. I know exactly what you're
And
talking about.
yeah, and at the time, like I found a healer. I think I found like the Heal documentary, and I found a healer that was in the Heal documentary. Then I found the medical medium. So I was just trying to put together whatever I could from whatever I read. And that was sort of what our first couple of months looked like. It was just literally like, okay, one foot in front of the other. She was 2 years old. I was getting crazy twisty straws so she could drink celery juice out of it. And
Yep.
we made sure, so we had already had no gluten and no dairy really, but then we pulled grains out. So we were doing everything we could, but I also allowed them to write her an NSAID, and they said, she's got more than a couple joints at this point. We think it's also an elbow. It may be both ankles. Like, this is polyarticular JIA. Your chances of this going into remission without us hitting it early and hard are very slim. And I remember I gave her this NSAID and I watched her get worse. And I think she only took it for 5 days. And in 5 days, I watched her get worse. And I said, no way am I giving her the NSAID. Something's wrong. And then I started to read about the gut health connection and how NSAIDs create this issue with the gut. And I'm like, what is happening? Why are we giving her things that are going to make her worse? So I found curcumin at the time, and the specific curcumin supplement that had really great research and was working just as well at lowering inflammation, but without all of the other repercussions that you were getting from NSAIDs. And I started her on that. And I'll never, ever, ever forget this conversation. And I'm sure you and everyone out there who has gone down this journey has had a similar conversation. But we were at HSS, like, the number 3 rheumatology pediatric hospital. And the doctor comes in, and at the time I had been following her, like you almost know your kid's labs, like your social security number,
Right.
like you're so immersed in it. And I remember when we started, her SED rate was a 55, and her SED rate is just kind of a general marker for inflammation. She didn't have a positive ANA or anything like that. Her SED rate was a 55, which is really high.
Yeah.
And while I was giving her the celery juice and the curcumin, it started to drop and she started to get better. And she went from a 55 to a 38 to a 27. And we had a follow-up, and I was really excited to see how it was progressing, because she looked like she was getting better to me.
Yeah.
She wasn't limping as quite as bad. Her knee had come down a bit. She wasn't better, but she was getting better. And the doctor comes in the room and she asks me what dose of the NSAID she's on. And she hadn't been on it in so long, I couldn't even remember. And I lied. I didn't say like, oh, she's not on it. I said, whatever. And she goes, oh, so you're giving her a quarter of what she's supposed to be taking? And I'm like,
how about 0? Okay, but anyway.
So she begins to read me the riot act. And I say to her, are we going to review her labs? I'm really curious to see what her labs look like, because I think she's getting better. Like, I'm watching her get better. We're doing lots of other things, and I think she's getting better. And her labs keep getting better with each visit. And she goes, no, they don't. Her labs keep fluctuating. And I said, no. 55, 38, 27. I want to know what it is now.
That's going
so
like that.
Goes through it, and she's a 10, which is essentially normal.
Wow.
And I said, seems like her lab's normalized. That's good news, right? And so she said, children with juvenile arthritis always have fluctuating labs, and you're going to be the reason that this child is crippled if you're not going to follow the protocols that we're giving her to get better. I was like, I don't understand. And in every rheumatology appointment would send me home in tears, every single one.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you do still second guess yourself. Like, I think that I'm brave and determined and have a whole lot of sass, but it's your child's health and wellness that you're worried about. And you're still panicked about, what if I make a wrong choice? Like, what if I'm the reason she doesn't get better? And I had those moments, and they were almost always right after a rheumatology appointment.
Yeah.
And I remember I sat kind of quiet, but knew I wasn't going to change what we were doing. And I said to the doctor, actually called back the next day, and I said, I need you to know that you cannot be our doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Because anyone who's willing to deliver this level of a diagnosis to someone with so very little hope and cannot root for the wins, regardless of
Yeah.
how they're achieved, cannot be our doctor. So
Mm-hmm.
we're leaving. And at that point, I didn't know if we would go back at all. I think I did one more like nurse practitioner, thinking, well, nurse practitioners, they see the whole body. And we went and I was like, no, I'm done. I'm not even going to rheumatology anymore. There's got to be a better way. If
Mm-hmm.
all they want to do is give her methotrexate and Enbrel, and, you know, for anyone who's kind of going through this journey, when you look at the black box warnings for some of these medications that they want to give your 2-year-old, you
Yeah.
know, there are things like lymphoma. So that really did not sit well with me. And I'm at this point just so grateful, right? That, you know, some of it was divine intervention and things fell into place, and some of it was grit and tenacity. But I think that the process can be lonely too, you know, and it's important to have somebody, and maybe, you know, for many people, it's their coach, you know, maybe that's the person that you can lean on and cry to, but it's lonely because not everyone understands what you're doing when you're doing it.
Yeah.
And that was a struggle. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So many
You
things
had a
I
lot of
just
that
want to
too.
highlight about what you
Yeah.
said. Definitely that final point you just made about not everybody understands, because we had a lot of that happen, and I've talked to so many clients who have that happen, like where they're doing something so simple, like, you know, we're going to try this out and take gluten out of the diet, or we're going to check for mold in our home, or whatever, and it's really not understood. And so, you know, get a lot of backlash, a lot of like questioning. Like I said, I've had, you know, been kicked out of I've been literally like a doctor walked out on me, you know, like, and these were things that aren't really a big thing, that were so like vehemently rejected, like a dietary change, you know, like we're gonna I mean, really, like, or you're gonna deprive your child of eating bread. I mean, like, well, I'm gonna actually deprive my child of a lifelong diagnosis. How about that? You know, that's the one thing that I just would like to withhold. You know, like if I'm gonna withhold anything, that's the thing. I You know, so it's like this, and often we are seen as being like, again, withholding or not allowing kids to be kids. The purpose is that we want our kids to be kids. We don't want
Yeah.
them growing up on a medication for the rest of their lives that is actually limiting their ability to be as healthy as possible. So how
Yeah.
about we introduce the things in a more positive light, right? Like encouraging parents to take control of their family's wellness, and encouraging them to find out more and bring that information to us as their support people, and encouraging them to you know, bring things to potlucks that other parents are asking them, like, hey, how'd you make that? Like that, those things really, like it spreads like a wildfire. Instead of spreading illness, we want to spread wellness, right? And so
Yeah.
that is the total shift that the medical model needs to change, and we need to throw it on its head. And for you to say, I think, like when you said that you would have lonely times, you would leave those in tears, those sessions in tears, or there's those that should never happen. That, I think, is malpractice. That is not the purpose of a support person, you know, medical or otherwise. And our purpose is to open up the world of possibility instead of slamming it in your face every time you come into an appointment. And when you say that you, of all people, felt like that, it is no wonder that so many people either give up or don't even start, because
Yeah.
you are like one of the most powerful women I know, and one of the most determined people. And what you have done for your daughter, I'm like, I am in awe. And when you, okay, so this is what you posted. So if you follow Tiffany on Instagram, she actually posted that very quote of that doctor saying to you, "You're going to be the reason why your child is crippled." And that quote was alongside a picture of your daughter having a heck of a time at gymnastics class. Like, and she's just like you. She's like, oh, like just full of vim and vigor. And I want you to tell us how she is today. I want you to tell us about that, like how she's doing today.
So, I mean, she's doing great today. Sometimes you even forget, right? Like you're
Mm,
so in the thick of the journey. And I think this is important too, right? For families that are starting out on the journey. Like, I tend to be like, grab the bull by the horns, let's do this, and not everybody realizes that your child can be healing, but it's not always going to be pretty, right? So I
yep,
didn't know that. Like I thought we're doing the right things and she's just going to get better.
yep.
But kind of it's a bit up and down, right? You take 3 steps forward, you take 1 step back, you take 5 steps. So there is some of that in the journey. And I think that's important for people to realize, right? Like when I speak to clients about their families and the things that like you really need, I think the things that you really need are probably like the mindset and determination first,
Mm-hmm.
a bit of patience and some
A lot.
faith also, because it's not always going to be easy. I think organization is probably really important, but a coach can help you get organized too.
Yeah.
And determination. And if you're working with someone, those are really the things that you need most, because someone else will help you with all of the little things that need to be put into place. But if you have those things, you'll knock it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that happened, right? And when you're in the thick of the journey, sometimes you feel like, when is this ever going to end? Like, when are they ever going to get better?
Mm-hmm.
And I at least found that the journey took us physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, like the journey kind of changes for you. Like you notice that you're doing all the work you can physically, but sometimes there's an energetic thing. And that may sound woo to people, but you'll get
Oh,
there.
not to me. At all.
Not to you.
No, and we're
No,
going to talk
certainly
about that in
not
a
to
second.
you.
Yeah.
But the journey will change for you, right? And then when you get to the place where your child is better, and Layla is better, like there's no inflammation, like she's walking fine. That video that you talked about, she had just landed her first front flip.
Yeah.
She's in soccer, like so. Layla's better,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you get there. And when I filmed that video, my brother said to me, "Never forget you did that."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my goodness. I didn't think about that at all. Like, I was like, oh my God, she got a front flip. I
Yeah.
wasn't like, she got a front flip, but I didn't know if she would ever be able to move that way. But there was a time where I didn't know if she would ever be able to move that way. The first time she went ice skating, I actually felt it, because I was like, those ankles are fine. She's running all over this ice. But as you get further from them getting better, sometimes you forget that you were really in the thick of it for a little while, but it passes. And I swear, I think it makes like the simple things more joyful on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's fiery and sassy and funny. And she came home from camp yesterday and said to me, my friend Brooke asked me why I eat healthy. And I said, did she? And what did you tell Brooke? And she said, I don't even understand that question. Why would you not eat healthy?
Oh, I love that. Oh, oh, so good.
And I was like, that was an amazing answer. And I'll give you some other ones in case anyone ever asks again. Hang on to these.
It's perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
so all right, so okay, but one thing I do
I
want
always answer the long way. I'm sorry. You never get a quick
no,
answer from
are
me.
you kidding me? If anybody's listening to me, it's like the same
That's
way.
why we
I
get
love
along.
it. No, you did not talk too much in any way. Every word you said, I was hanging on because it was so impactful and literally like I am just inspired. I'm inspired every time I talk to you. Every time I think about you and what you've done and what you continue to do. And you know what, okay, so this is the final thing I wanted to talk about, because we've talked about grit, determination, tenacity, all those things. Yet that can be tiring. We also talked about, the times when you feel doubt, you don't feel supported. You feel like out, without actually outside of the tribe. And this tribe is all in this belief system. And you're like, everybody wake up. Like, don't you see that this is like these realities, and
Yeah.
nobody else is really waking up to that. So there's so much that happens through this journey that's not just about like physical, reducing the inflammation of her knees or joints. That
Yeah.
is like well, that's only the symptom of the whole picture. And so I remember when we met, and the first time we
Mhm.
met, and I thought, well, okay, this woman has it down. She's like determined, and like, you know, like that client you always want, that's like just on it. And but at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, how do I enter this? Like, where? How do I help her? Because she's really like, she knows what she's doing. She's going down the right, all the avenues I would suggest. Yet I thought, okay, support. And also bringing in more information, because that's when you actually took my training program not that long, maybe it was a year after that or something. And so we continued on that journey together. But I think one of the most significant things I think that was added as we moved through this, or as you moved through your journey, was realizing that you needed to take care of yourself. And that all this, like, because I am the same way, I'm like all in, up to my elbows, like rah 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 rah. But then there comes a time where we need to let go of some things, like, and we of outcomes, of expectations, about timelines, about deadlines, about, because that will drive us completely insane, and we will put pressure
It
on our
did.
family. Will be not nice people. We will be super stressed, worried, like, right. And so it's like,
That was
go to,
terrible.
and I remember telling you, Tiffany, do you remember this? I said, and this is where
Yes.
the woo woo comes in, okay? And now you're like up and down. You do more meditation than I do, I think. I don't know. But I was like, because I'm like, well, I realized you live by the beach. And I literally told you that week, I was like, just go to the beach. Like, I know you live like this far away from the beach.
Yeah.
Go to the beach. And then you started exploring like meditation, and then like we talked so much about Joe Dispenza and his teachings and his meditations, and we were like, we even have plans to meet someday at one of his week long intensives or whatever. But and so I was so happy for you that you were exploring that, because I let me know what, like, tell us what that change was for you, adding that element. And you say woo woo, I let's like say that just to say, to tongue in cheek, say, but we don't think it's woo at all, like literally.
No,
Step.
meditation has saved my life.
Okay.
So I'm the kind of person that someone should have taught meditation to when I was like
Yep.
10.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Like when you're going through this journey and you're up to your elbows, I was an absolutely miserable human to be around. Like
Okay.
I didn't like anyone else. No one was respecting my wishes. My brother joked that they never came over for a full year without getting thrown out. I would be like,
Oh.
everybody out. Like
Oh.
someone would try to hand Layla something that she wasn't supposed to eat,
Get
and
out.
everybody out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I didn't want to leave her in anyone else's care because I was afraid if they gave her something to eat, I was absolutely crazed. I was on a mission,
Yeah.
but I was stressed. I was anxious. I was irritable. I was agitated. I was unpleasant. And that's probably being nice. So, and I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't sleeping. I was hardly eating. My husband nicknamed me Scraps at the time. I was very consumed with what Layla was eating because I wanted to make sure that she was getting everything she needed to and nothing she wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have the time, I thought, to take care of myself. I read all night, researched all night, ran around all day,
Yeah.
and
Worked.
I
Yeah.
was losing weight and unhappy. And then I got sick afterwards. A couple months later, I ended up getting sick, and now we both were in this journey. And it was twice the resources, twice the time, twice the money, twice the energy,
Yeah.
because I didn't heed the advice early enough to
Mm-hmm.
take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember exactly what the catalyst was that started me on meditation, like what the one moment was. I do remember it was oh my goodness, Emily, the M word. I did like one of her meditation like workshops. I think it
Okay.
was like a
Yeah.
2 week. Emily Fletcher.
Yeah. Okay.
And that started me, but I noticed pretty quickly that there was a difference on the days, and you don't always meditate every day right from the beginning, and you always feel like you're doing it wrong when you start,
Yep. Even
and
when you're
you
not,
aren't.
even when
Right.
you're
You
you're
aren't.
in.
You can't do
Yeah.
meditation wrong. Your mind is going to be busy. It doesn't just, oh, I'm meditating. It's going to go silent in there. Your
Yeah.
mind is like your heartbeat. It's going to keep going.
Yeah.
But over time, you get better at letting those thoughts
Yeah.
pass. And I noticed right out of the gate that I was a much better human
Yep.
when I meditated. The point, right, with meditation isn't how do I get better at sitting quietly with my legs folded? It's how do I get better at life? And it
Yeah.
was definitely making me better at life. And in moments that would have caused an enormous explosion of a reaction, I was able to come back to my breath. And I think that, just meditating alone started me looking into other things like our, energetic connection with our children. And we
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
it doesn't exist, but it exists. And we are very intertwined energetically with our children, and our peace in our nervous system translates to their peace
Yeah.
in their nervous system. And then I started to look at things for Layla also, in regards to how do I help her regulate. So, I have a 7-year-old now who eats like a yoga teacher, who knows how to find her breath when she's better at finding it when she's scared or hurt. When
Mm.
she's mad, she's not so great at it, but genetically, she's gonna have some work to do there. But we're gonna get her there. But I had to go away for something the other day, and she goes, "Is this a Joe Dispenza trip?" Like she knows, like, you're gonna be gone long. Where are you going? Is this some kind of meditation retreat? She gets it.
Yeah.
And we've used a lot of different, modalities. She's done things like the brain harmony program to help with her vagal function and
Yep.
to help reset her parasympathetic nervous system. And those things, meditation and all of those things, initially to me seemed like they were out in left field. And now I find that they're the things that ground me most, that make me the most happy,
Mm-hmm.
and can sometimes supersede even the physical things, because that trickle down effect is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Love it. I love it. Okay. So we're going to end on that because that's a highly empowering notion. And I think that we've covered, like, the full picture of what it takes, right? Like, it's not, it is, yeah, it's grit, it's tenacity, it's like determination, it's motivation, it's that mama intuition, that parent intuition, listening to us, it's empowerment. It is looking at that healing journey as a positive, and at first it doesn't always seem that way, like, but I mean, maybe like with Layla, this happening in that early in her life, was you were able to make that shift before, like, 20-30 years down the road, when all that stuff has to be undone, and where celery juice is gross, and practicing yoga is weird. Like, for her, she just lives it.
Yeah.
That's the stuff of life. It's natural to her. And when her friend says to her, "Why do you eat healthy?" It's like, why wouldn't you? Like, so it's like this, like, what? Like, so it's like a knowing. So we move out of that medical model and into like this more natural life that took you a lot of effort, right? But now it's effortless for her. Like, I mean, of course, we live in our environment, we see all these other things, but essentially speaking, like, it's become default. So I love that. I love your story. And so what I want to end with, and I'm just going to put you on the spot. Do you have anything that you want to say, that you would say to a parent starting out in this journey, or be middle of it, or end anywhere in this journey? Like, what would you tell parents about receiving a diagnosis, receiving a prognosis? What kind of final thoughts would you like to leave them with?
I mean, I guess in regards to receiving a diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to change the way we think about that in general,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's just a name for something that's happening in your child's body.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really happening is something is out of balance, right? Like, the body doesn't attack itself. There is a reason that this is happening. So I would say always think why, not what diagnosis is this, not what medication, why. Why is this happening in my child's body? How do I figure out what the root causes are? And sometimes it's more than one. For Layla, there were a lot. And how do I go about unraveling those root causes and staying present and patient and knowing, like, getting quiet enough to listen to my intuition, to not question that because someone else told me I'm going to be the reason my child is crippled. You are connected to that baby in a way that no one else could ever be. And you're just afraid. So
Yeah.
try to breathe through the fear and know that you can help this child get better in a way that many other people cannot. And also know that, like, even though it probably seems absolutely miserable in the moment, there will come a time where you will be so grateful for that misery, because it will change not only your life and your child's life for the better, but it's going to change everyone around you. Because as lonely as you feel when you start this journey and people think that you're crazy and they're talking about you behind your back, when you get that kid there, those same people are going to admit it to you, and they're going to say, we thought you were nuts.
Yep.
And we can't believe that you weren't, and that this baby is better. And then they're going to say, I feel this way, or I feel that way. How do I do this? How do I do that? It changed the health of not only my immediate family, but my extended family and my friends. And even before, I was working with you, Carla, and I started seeing clients, like, I'm the go-to friend.
Yep.
Your kid's sick at 3 a.m, like, I'm who gets the phone calls of like, what homeopathy do I give? She hasn't stopped vomiting in 6 hours. Or, what supplements, or what, people send me lab work like I'm their doctor, regardless of if they're my client or not.
Yeah.
Because when you do this, you become so passionate about, I lived through the fear and I just want to help other people get through it without so much fear. So the dollar amount doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a client, a friend of a friend, a stranger. Like, I'm happy to give you all of the information I have, because I want your family to thrive in a way that we didn't really right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So stay brave and know that your intuition means a whole lot more than a diagnosis.
Oh, man, I am not going to say anything else. That is the perfect place to end. Tiffany, thank you so much for this conversation. I just want to go run around and like do something now. I'm so like energized by your words. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thanks for being part of this conversation.
Thank you, Carla.